Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte. Today's guest is Jonas Bogoshi, the Chief Executive of Gijima. Jonas, welcome to the show. You have an inspirational story from emerging from a very poor household to become a really big decision maker in the South African economy. How did that all start?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I must say that I'm humbled to say that, for you to say that I am one of the top decision makers. Just to give you my background, I was born and bred in Pretoria. And as you said, my parents were just normal working class parents. My mother was a domestic worker and my father a normal laborer. But both of them had high regards for education, so they pushed me a lot into studying. And I started doing that at an early age, and I really liked studying. And at one stage, I read about a computer. I just liked it. I didn't know what it was all about, but it was just fascinating. It was about somebody who wrote an application on a computer. I just wanted to understand more about it, but I could not get more information about it. But it was always back of my mind about this thing called computers. And when I finished matric, I passed very well in mathematics. I wanted to become a lecturer in mathematics. I loved maths, and I thought that would be the right thing for me to do. My dream was to be a professor in mathematics, and I went to University of Cape Town to study mathematics, which I did on the first year. And one of the modules I took required us to use a computer. We wrote some applications for applied mathematics. And I got interested in computers, and I switched from maths to computer science. Actually, from maths to computer science, and I graduated in both maths and computer science from UCT.
Your first job was with IBM.
Yes.
How did that come about? What were your responsibilities at IBM?
I joined IBM as a systems engineer. And my responsibilities then were to look after United Building Society. I was one of the engineers looking after their local area networks and writing some small applications for what was then called multi-listing services. It was a property solution. So that's what I was doing. I liked the job. It was in line with what I studied. But at one stage, we got people to present to us what they were doing. So IBM had this idea of getting people who were in IBM for a long time to discuss with new people what they were doing. And one of them was a sales guy. So he came to talk to us about what he was doing. He was selling mainframe. And I remember his words. All he said is that I'm a salesman. I sell mainframe. I don't know how they work, but I sell them. I just liked that attitude of the man. And I moved quickly into sales. And I've been in sales in my life since then. So I've not looked back.
You also moved to Shell and Cisco, which are also big multinational companies. But at Cisco, you declined an offer to become the country leader for Cisco in South Africa. How did that decision come about?
Yeah, I must say that I was lucky to work for these multinationals, and Cisco was one of those eye-opening companies. At that stage, I think Cisco was, I can boldly say, defining what was happening on the internet. Cisco was releasing lots of products that really were driving the internet, and I learned a lot. I was responsible for what was then called commercial business. So I was running all the distribution business for Cisco in Sub-Saharan Africa and all the resellers that were buying from distribution. And there were two other parts of the business, the enterprise business and also the service provider. So when they offered me the job to become the country manager, it was one of those tough decisions. One is it was going to make me a very rich person in terms of stock options and everything else, but I felt I did not have the enough experience, especially on the other two lines of business, which were quite big. The service provider business and also the enterprise business were much bigger businesses. And whether you call it that was, maybe it was cold feet, but for me it was being honest with myself that, yes, maybe I'll be rich, but a rich failure. So I decided to stick to what I had, and I asked them that the time was not right for me to move to that position. Obviously, my family was not happy about it, but in hindsight, it was the right decision for me to take. So I'm happy I didn't take that job because I was not ready for it then.
In 2004, you jumped the fence, so to speak. You joined government in a very senior position at SITA, the State Information Technology Agency. What What were your experience working for government as opposed to these multinational companies?
Yeah, at that stage, I worked for multinationals for about 14 years. So it was Cisco and IBM, both about 7 years or so. And at that stage, we were talking about the building of South Africa. And as somebody who felt privileged to work for multinationals at a high level, I saw a duty for myself to go and plow back society. The experience I got from those three companies, Shell, IBM, and Cisco, was really fundamental. It was really very good. I wanted to plow back society. I must say it was not totally selfish. It was not totally selfish. Part of it was it was an organization that required a turnaround, and I was going to be part of a team turning around a large organization. I thought that would be good for me as an experience, but also exposure to the leaders in the country and also leaders in the IT industry. When I got there, I was fascinated by what the role of SITA is, and the role of SITA, which is really to coordinate all IT activities for the public sector. It was tough. I think even today I still believe that the mandate of SITA is too broad for what it is doing, and we worked hard with the team to try and turn around the organization. But what I did find that while we had some good people, people with quite good experience, what the entity lacked was a very strong processes around how to drive business, and that has been a challenge. I think when I was there, and now that I'm outside, I can see with more and more that that's the biggest challenge of SITA.
But in 2007, you've joined Gijima AST. It was a company with a very colourful history, very volatile. It must have been a significant change for you.
For me, it was. All my life, I worked for multinationals, so it was the first time working for a South African listed company and coming to that company as a leader. So it was both changes: listed company in South Africa and also as the leader of a company. It was an interesting part for me. At that stage, I had a three-year contract with SITA, so it came up for it was the end of the contract. I wanted to move on, and the opportunity to lead Gijima came about, and I was quite happy to take it because on one level, it was going to be a challenge for me, but because I was the customer of the industry working for SITA, I had a view of where challenges for Gijima were and how to tackle them. I must say that it was just a preliminary view of what the challenges were. Since I've been with Gijima, I'm very happy to that. It has been a learning curve for me the last 4 years. If I compare my experience, our learning experience in the last few years and the last 4 years were very steep learning curve for me. So I'm very happy I took the role.
But government business is still, it remains a very big part of Gijima. There's also a lot of contentious, debate regarding the way government issues tenders to companies. What is your experience dealing with government? You have had a big tender or a big relationship with government, terminated the Who Am I online project, which was a massive write-down for Gijima. But how do you experience, dealing with government at the moment?
Yeah, I'll deal with the Who Am I online issue later. But just in general, to talk about tendering process in government. I think worldwide governments have a challenge in how to procure IT products and services. The procurement function comes from buying commodity services or commodity products, and it doesn't quite lend itself correctly for buying things that you cannot touch, like IT products and services. Buying PCs, etc., is okay, but buying a solution is complex. And I think governments worldwide are battling with that, and South African government is not exception to that. With the challenges that are going on in SITA and that were leadership challenges in the last 4 or 5 years, I think it made it even more and more complex. If I look at the last few tenders released by SITA, the large ones, which are complex, I can see that they are struggling to come up with a model that will suit everybody. Yes, on one hand, you have to look for something that is, in terms of price, it's the right price. You have to look for something that takes care of things like BEE. But then when it comes to functionality, that's even more complex because things are changing in the world. And I can see that SITA, like any entity around the world, they're struggling to find that one right. But government still remains a big part of our business. As Gijima, yes, it has moved from about 49% of the business to about 36%. It still remains a big part. We have a strong relationship with government, and what we try to do is where areas where we believe that CETA need to look at things differently, we sit down with them and talk to them about it. In some cases, not even to sell, but to say that our view from the industry, without taking Gijima head on, is that this is how you should be looking at things. For example, there are lots of things about how they have to procure cloud computing. It's a complex thing, it's a new thing. You cannot use the old models of procuring IT products and services to procure this, as an example. And we engage CETA on that. And I must say that in the last year and a half, I've seen more and more willingness and openness from CETA to talk to industry so that we can work as a team. And I think if we can continue with that, that will make the relationship much better for CETA and private sector.
So you definitely think there's an improvement in the way CETA procures or issues the tenders and how it is being granted?
Yeah, sure. Now, let me be clear on that one. Say that if you look overall, in general, I think there's an improvement. However, when we look to large, complex tenders, I think there's still a challenge. And that is something that both CETA and industry need to sit down and find a different way of doing that. There were large tenders recently, lots of them written about in the newspapers because people said they were the wrong way to approach it. And I can understand why. But they are too complex and they require a different way to procure. If I leave those complex tenders and I look at the normal run rate business, even if it's still services, I think there's a huge improvement from CETA.
Coming back to Gijima, last year you wrote down a 375 million rand in the Who Am I online initiative. You did get some negative comments for doing that because it was more than half of the market
Absolutely.
value of Gijima at that stage. Why? What was the thinking behind not challenging government and rather settling and writing that down, that project?
That was probably one of the most difficult decisions that I was ever involved in. And I hope it's going to be I hope there's going to be no other one worse than that. It was more complex. You're absolutely right. The writing off of 375 million rand, half the shareholder value, and that was a big challenge. So it was not an easy decision to take by the board. But if I take you back, it's at that time, government was about 49% of our business, as I said. And as the board, we sat down and looked at we were faced with two options. One option was to litigate against government because we had legal opinion from two senior counsels that we had a chance to win the case. So we could litigate against government. So and we did consider that seriously. The second part was if we settle with government and everybody wrote off, meaning that we wrote off something, government wrote off something, and also some of the providers. So what was the best option between the two? The litigation one, which was, in my opinion, a principled decision, and Badi was pushing for that part, unfortunately will have meant that we'll be involved in litigation for 5 years. That would have meant that as a CEO of the company, I'll spend more time dealing with the legal issue than running the business. Secondly, it will have affected the relationship with a big part of our business, 49% of the business. So we took that decision. So we took a decision that we're going to have a write-off. Once off, write-off with negative impact, but moved on. If you think about it, if you're an investor in a company, yes, there was an issue with having the shareholder equity. However, you have to look at the future of the business. If you write off, you retain that relationship with government, you can get more business from government, and therefore the future of business is much better than if we still were hanging with this uncertainty over 5 years.
But has that materialized over the last year?
Absolutely. So if I look at the relationship between us and government now, it has improved. We continue to win business from government and even winning large tenders. If I look, obviously, when I close period, I can't talk to you about the numbers now. But if I look at that, I can see huge contribution from government. And that, for me, shows that was the right decision for us to make. Yes, negative impact once off, but long-term, the right decision to have taken.
Jonas, Gijima was one of the first companies to issue iPads to virtually all its employees. It's a bold step.
Yes.
That was also big in the news last year. What was the effect? Do you see a improvement in productivity from employees? Why do you think the iPad will become such a critical tool in the business environment?
If we look into the future, by 2016, there will be more tablets shipped than PCs and laptops combined. So in the future, there will be more tablets, iPad being one of those. And as a company, we looked at where is the industry going and how do we make our own employees to understand the future and start playing with that future today. It was a bold decision, but we believe that mobility is going to be a way to go. So far, I'm quite happy. I'm happy because the team is putting together, firstly, a strategy that will get us into mobility very quickly. They worked on it in a typical mobility speed within 1 week, reviewed everything that we did, put together a plan. I still have to approve the funding for it. But for me, that was an indication that if you give people a future that they can aspire to, then you can mobilize their thinking and their energies. So far, if I look at the discussions taking place in the company about mobility, if I look at the sales on iPads, if I look at the applications we are writing internally for ourselves and some of them for customers, I think that's the right decision. It's a bold one. It was a bit risky, but I can say it will put us ahead of our competitors in terms of being a key player in mobility.
Just briefly, we're at the start of a new year. What do you expect for 2012?
This is going to be a tough one for South Africa. Firstly, if I think of South Africa, there's going to be the elections around the ANC. That will have an impact, obviously, on the country. I hope that goes well. If I look at the celebrations, centenary celebrations, I think we may just be on the right track. But that's an important thing to deal with very quickly. That's the first part. I don't have to talk about the economy, but our industry in general in the next coming 18 months will be fairly pedestrian in terms of growth. So I expect us as a company to have a huge focus on cost reduction, on cost containment, because that's what our customers will be asking for. If I look at the mining industry or financial services, they'll be asking us to cut costs, and that's what we'll be focusing on going forward. I do foresee, though, that beyond 18 months, there's an array of hope in terms of growth. If you still talking about commodity services, you're going to have a challenge, but with a new things like mobility, like cloud computing, etc., I think there's an opportunity for growth for all of us. So I expect us as a company to have a huge focus on cost reduction, on cost containment, because that's what our customers will be asking for. If I look at the mining industry or financial services, they'll be asking us to cut costs, and that's what we'll be focusing on going forward. I do foresee, though, that beyond 18 months, there's an array of hope in terms of growth. If you still talking about commodity services, you're going to have a challenge, but with a new things like mobility, like cloud computing, etc., I think there's an opportunity for growth for all of us.
Thank you. That was Jonas Bogoshi, the Chief Executive of Gijima AST. Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.